What's up YouTube, it's Brandon from B-Town Doors, and today we're going to talk about how to sight in a compound bow. It can be super easy, but it also can be a little stressful if you don't know what you're doing. But over time, the more you do it, the easier it becomes, and let's face it, shooting a bow a dozen times, a couple dozen times, never a bad thing. So whenever I do anything that I have to sight on my bow or tune my bow or anything, what I like to do is I like to group tune my arrows. The reason I do that is because, believe it or not, your arrows sometimes fly a little inconsistent. You could buy 12 arrows or a half dozen arrows at the store. They're already fletched, they're already ready to go, and you might have one or two in that group or in that set that is flying a little different. I don't know if it's extra glue or the fletching's a little off in size or the spine could be a little different on the arrow. I don't know what it is, but I like to group tune my arrows. And how you do that is, let's say I have 10 arrows. I'm going to shoot all 10 arrows from 10, 15, however many yards. And in that 10, if there's two that are kind of off the group and I know I put a good shot on them, what I want to do is I want to turn that nock just a tiny little bit, because believe it or not, that's going to help. And you shoot until basically you bring that arrow back to the group. So just shoot an arrow till you get back in the group, shoot, twist the nock until you've completely group tuned your arrows and they're all flying the exact same. The reason I like to do that is because if I'm shooting 2 or 3 arrows and one of them is flying different, then I'm going to get a different group, and so it's going to be a little confusing when it comes to sighting in your bow. So I could be shooting at 20 yards and have 2 in a consistent group and 1 flyer. I know I put a good shot on it. It's going to make me question how I'm sighting in my bow. So you want to make sure all your arrows are flying consistent. There are some people who tune their bow or are sighting their bow with 1 arrow, and that's just kind of pain in the butt, because once you get back to 20, 30, 40 yards and shooting 1 arrow at a time and walking 40 yards to get that arrow, that's just time consuming, and I think it's just a waste of time. So next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to decide what you want your pins to be. A lot of newer bows today, you start with a 20-yard pin and you can go all the way to 60. There's some sites that allow you to go to 100, 120. I would never shoot that far unless I'm trying to show off, and we know that's not the case because I can barely hit at 50 yards. But with a lot of the newer bows, you're not really gonna want to do every 5 yards. I had an old Bear bow from probably the early 90s, and I had a 10-yard pin, 15-yard pin. I did every 5 just because my bow, it was a little bit slower. So the difference between my 10-yard pin and my 20-yard pin, there was a pretty big difference. My bow now, I'm not going to get any drop with my arrow from 10 to 20 yards. And if I do, it's maybe an inch, if that. So in the case of this video, I've got a 5-pin sight, and we're going to start with the top pin's going to be 20, and we're going to move all the way down to 60 yards, each pin being a 10-yard difference. Now the next thing I'm going to want to talk about is the rule that everybody who is sighting in a bow should follow. And for some reason, when I started shooting bows, I could not get this through my head. I don't know if I was just stupid or dumb or whatever, but I could not get the concept down to follow your arrow. When you're shooting your bow and you hit high and right, you want to move your sight high and right. But for some reason, I couldn't get it through my head. So if my arrow hit left, then naturally I thought I need to move my sight to the right to correct for that. And for the longest time, I didn't know how to sight on my bow because I just couldn't understand the little simple concept of follow your arrow. Now, if you're dumb like me and still can't really wrap your mind around it, because it does sound good to, if your arrow's hitting left, to move your sight right. That does sound good for a lot of you newer shooters or people who are newer to archery. So think about it like this. This is going to be hard to do because I'm mirroring you guys. So if you're holding on your bow and your arrow hits to the left, in your guys' case, my right, your guys' left. So what's going to happen is, if your arrow's hitting left and you want to move your sight to the right, what that's going to do is, when you get that sight in your sight line or your peep sight, you're going to have to move your arm like this, bringing the bow more left, which is going to cause the arrow to drift more left. So as stupid as that sounds, there might be some people out there who doesn't understand the concept of follow your arrow like me. So you're going to get sick of me hearing that term, follow your damn arrow. So I got my bow here. The next thing that I do is a little unorthodox. I've watched many videos. I've talked to a lot of people about sighting in your bow, and I'm about the only one that I know who will take their sight, whether they get it new, whether they are just throwing it on their bow, But I like to keep my 20-yard pin where it is. I actually like to move my 20-yard pin up in the housing just a tiny bit, and then I like to take my other pins and just move them all the way down. You could keep them all at the same group, but I'd always just drop these all the way to the bottom just to make it a little bit easier for me to sight in my other pins, and then I can just bring these pins up when it's time to sight in those pins. So we're gonna actually move outside, and I'm gonna teach you how to sight in your bow. All right, guys, I'm right at 20 yards. Let's get that top pin set. I'm gonna shoot 3 arrows to give me an accurate representation of where my arrows are flying. And also I've got a XY axis taped to my target, so it'll be easier to read where my arrows are. All right, so I'm way low and way right. Before I do anything with elevation, I'm gonna do windage first. So since I'm way right, I'm gonna wanna get that straightened out and get that dead set before I do anything with height. So in order to do that, I'm just going to break this bolt right here. I don't wanna get it too loose because I don't want this thing moving on its own. I want it to still be a little bit hard for me to move. So I'm gonna follow my arrow. So since my arrow was way right, I'm gonna move the sight to the right. Maybe just maybe a couple windage marks, probably 6 or 7. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're gonna lock that down, and I'm gonna shoot 3 more arrows. All right, so it actually looks like I moved them a little too far, so I'm gonna probably go about 1 or 2 windage marks back the other way. So I'm gonna move this back to the right, maybe 1 or 2 windage marks, not much. That's probably all I need. All right, 3 more arrows to see if we got it. All right, there we go, on to the elevation. So those last 3 arrows weren't as accurate as I thought. I walked up there to get them, and that's all user error. I'm gonna say that my sight's dead on, and I just need to practice more in the wind. All right, so when you're sighting in your first pin, I'm not gonna move the pin at all. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a full housing adjustment or a gang adjust. Basically, the reason for that is if I have to move this down maybe 2 or 3 times, what's gonna happen is I'm eliminating the room that I have for these 4 pins. So if I have my 20-yard pin set down here, then these pins have no room to work with. If I move my entire housing, then this pin stays where it is and I still have all this room, and I'm just going to put my pin dead on using the entire gang adjustment. So elevation is a bit more annoying because there's more weight to it than the right and left. So as you loosen this, this might fall. So I'm gonna try to get around the camera, and I'm gonna hold it with these 2 fingers, and I'm gonna pop it loose. And I'm probably 8 or 9 inches low, so I'm gonna go about 5 windage marks down with my entire housing. So, being super careful about it. That's probably good right there. I'm gonna tighten it down, and we're gonna shoot 3 more arrows. So I jerked that last arrow, but I'm still a little bit low, so I'm gonna move my entire sight housing down 2 more notches. Elevation, round 2. So I don't need 2 more arrows to tell me that that's a dead-on shot. I'll take that any day. That being said, I'm gonna say that my top pin is perfectly set for 20 yards. So guys, in that clip, you're gonna notice that my arrow didn't exactly hit the bullseye. I could have been a lot more precise on where my arrow actually hit, but I was just trying to give you a general idea of how to sight in your top pin. And this is actually not the sight that I'm gonna be using for hunting. When I actually put my hunting sight on here, I'm gonna spend a really long time. I'm gonna shoot a lot more arrows and just make sure that that is shooting damn near perfect and exactly how I want it to shoot. So when it comes down to your actual sight, and you get your bow set up how you want it to, I'm going to make sure that I am making it so perfect to the way I shoot that when I'm out in the field, I have all the confidence in the world that I'm going to hit my target. So even though it can get a little annoying and a little tedious, just take the time to make sure that your pins are exactly where they need to be. So after you get your 20-yard pin set, or whatever your top pin is, you're going to move back to your next distance. In my case, that was 30 yards. And what I'm going to want to do is I'm actually going to use the pin that I just sighted in. So in my case, I moved back to 30 yards, and I would aim at the target with my 20-yard pin. So obviously if I drop my pins down here before I even started sighting in, I'm not going to want to use my 30-yard pin because I'll be shooting way over the target, probably kill somebody. So I like to go back to the distance and then shoot from the 20-yard pin because I know my arrow's going to hit low, but the question is how low? Is it 9 inches low? Is it a full foot low? That's what you want to figure out. And then you can move your 30-yard pin or your next pin to that distance or to the area where you think it's going to go, and then you can just shoot more arrows and then adjust accordingly. And then I'm going to move back to 40 yards and do the exact same thing. At 40 yards, I'm going to use my 30-yard pin, establish how low it is, and then adjust my 40-yard pin, get it to where I think it's going to be, and then shoot 5, 6, 7 arrows, and then really dial it in. So you might run into a situation where you're dead on at 20 yards, but you move back to 30 and 40, and you find your arrow either tailing to the right or the left. What that means is that your rest is not lined up perfectly with your sight. A couple years ago, I took a couple aviation classes in school, and basically we were learning about instruments and flight plans and how to reading all the instruments on your panel. And my teacher talked about setting your compass, and he said if you're traveling 300 or 400 miles and your compass is off by either plus or minus 1 degree, you're going to completely miss your destination. Now 1 degree doesn't sound like much, but if your destination is here and you're flying at about 300 miles and you're either off by a tiny little degree on your compass, over that distance you're going to find your plane getting further and further away from your destination. And when you finally get to where you think you are, you might be 60 or 50 miles from your actual destination. That's no different with your arrow. If you're shooting dead on at 20 yards, sorry, my pen's running out of ink. If you're sighting in and you're dead on at 20 yards, but your rest is a tiny bit off, you're going to hit perfect at 20, and you're going to move back to 30 and 40. You're going to find that your arrow, the further it travels, the further right it's going to become. So like I said, dead on at 20, by the time you get to 60 yards, you might be 6 inches to even a foot off, or you're completely missing the target. So you want to make sure that your rest is perfectly lined up with your sight. I apologize for my terrible illustrations. So you can either adjust your rest accordingly, or you can do what's called a French tune or a walkback tune. Basically what those do is help you align your rest with your sight. Personally, I like the French tune. I think it's easier. I think you can get a lot more precise, and it's a tiny bit funner to do. And walkback tuning is not bad, but the reason I like French tune and the reason it's more precise is walkback tuning, you're going to shoot from 10, 20, 30, and 40 yards using your top pin every time. So your arrow is going to drop on your target, but you're also going to see if it's either right or left. Now, I don't know anybody out there, unless you're someone like Levi Morgan or some professional shooter out there, who is going to be dead on at 40 and 50 yards. Yes, you might hit the 12 ring, or you might hit a group about that big from that distance, but that's not precise enough for me. When I'm sighting in my bow or when I'm tuning my bow, I want to make sure that everything is dead on. So when you walk back tune, yes, you're going to get a close reading, but I don't think you're really going to get a very accurate reading. I haven't done a walkback tune video yet, but the French tune video will be in the description below, so go check that out. And guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. If you did, please like, comment, subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter. And guys, have a good day.